Welcome to the Concordian United Church's presentation of Around the World in 60 Minutes.
And here's Johnny.
Hi there. When Mary and I first envisioned this presentation, it was back in October at the beginning of our fundraising for our new Concordian United Church heating system. We needed 2 new furnaces and 2 heat pumps. There has been a fantastic response to our initial capital fund request, so a big thank you to our membership. Later in the presentation, you will be given a slide to promote donations to the Capital Fund for those that wish to make a donation. Now, Mary and I want to say a big thank you to the 8 people who took the time to gather their pictures and thoughts to create the various travel presentations you're going to see tonight. Although it takes a lot of time to put the narrations into the presentations, the one thing that most of the people complained about was being limited to 5 or 6 minutes for the presentation. Our agenda for tonight will have Gord doing the opening prayer, and then we will have the 8 presentations as listed on the agenda that's on your screen. Then Gord will have a closing meeting with us all and have a closing prayer. Near the end of the presentations, we'll put up some information about making a donation. Again, please consider making a donation. It's for a good cause, but it's totally up to you. Gord, could you please open with a prayer?
I certainly will. Let's join together in prayer, everyone. Loving God, we come together even while we are isolated, instructed to stay home so we can keep one another safe, missing opportunities to gather and to chat in a crowd, perhaps even with a beverage and snack, all while longing for the freedom to travel to exotic locations and to see new wonders. Yet, here we are, separate yet together, linked digitally, eager to see exotic locations and new wonders, albeit vicariously. May our hearts, O God, be filled with joy and with belonging, even as you connect us, one to each other, through your Spirit. Bless us in our gathering that your joy may overflow. Amen.
This presentation tonight is about a trip that Richard and Barb Hall took to Cologne, Germany. When we recorded the presentation, Mary called Richard our very own personal Rick Steves. See what you think.
Hi, my name's Richard Hall. My wife Barb and I have been part of Concordian United Church for about a year, and we live in Wingham. In 2017, we did Viking's Grand European Cruise, and one of the highlights was visiting Cologne Cathedral in Germany. Built over 632 years, beginning in 1248, Cologne Cathedral is Germany's most visited landmark, with 20,000 visitors per day, and it was declared a World Heritage Site in 1996. Cologne Cathedral is the tallest church in the world, depending on how it's measured. It was the tallest building in the world from 1880 to 1884, when the Washington Monument was completed. What we're looking at here is a full-scale replica of just the tip of one of the tower spires. And here we have the entrance to the cathedral, with statuary surrounding the entrance, protecting it, of apostles, prophets, and angels. And just inside the entrance is the nave. Please take special note of the vaulted ceiling at the top. I'm going to be referring to that in just a moment. And this is the south transept window, fairly modern, completed in just 2007, but it comprises of over 11,000 squares of mouth-blown glass. And Dave would be interested in this. This is the Swallow's Nest organ console, not attached to the wall but suspended from the ceiling. This window is the Adoration of the Magi. It's significant because Cologne Cathedral is known to be the depository of the relics of the 3 Magi. This is the high altar and the shrine of the Magi, that golden box, which supposedly holds the relics of the Magi. I don't know about that, but it's certainly a wonderful place to remember the story. And the side of the shrine has apostles at the bottom and prophets at the top. And behind the shrine is a statue of the 3 Magi. Now, when traveling in Europe, One cathedral tends to be much like the last, and every town has one. But we took a special tour here called the Top of Cologne to see one of the world's most significant churches from an entirely different perspective. Here we are touring the flying buttresses from the workers' walkway. Here we are in the gallery normally restricted to the staff, looking along the length of the nave, and here's a telescopic view of the chancel and high altar that we saw earlier, with the shrine of the Magi surrounded by apostles, prophets, and angels. This crack in one of the towers wasn't actually that reassuring, but it's a crack from World War II bombing. And here's the top of the vaulted ceiling from the other side. And we were amazed to find all kinds of staff rooms above this. Here I am with an 86-pound wrench, which is used to turn the nuts at the base of the girders. And this is in one of the main permanent restoration workshops. There's a whole staff that works year-round because of acid rain deteriorating the outside of the cathedral on a constant basis. Here's Barb being not renovated herself, but standing beside a gargoyle that's being renovated. And here we are walking along essentially the eaves trough of the edge of the cathedral roof. And from there, this is the view of the towers. The south tower, the one on the left, can be climbed, but there's no lift. 533 steps, takes about a half an hour to climb. And here is, this is not my picture, but this is St. Peter's Bell, which is about halfway up that south tower, 24 tons, the largest moving bell in the world. And here's the spiral staircase that takes us to the crossing tower. It's a tower near the Twin Towers, but a little bit further back and a little bit lower, about 100 feet less than the viewpoint on the main towers. So here we are at the crossing tower looking to the east. And here's Barb and I standing in the crossing tower with the Twin Towers behind us. And the view from up top was absolutely wonderful of the city and the surroundings. In this picture, you can see the two main towers on the right, and the crossing tower we were in is just to the left of that. And in the evening, a wonderful view of Cologne Cathedral on the Rhine. Thank you.
Wow, eh? A big thanks to Richard. The cathedral looked amazing. Next, we have Shirley Marie Harris talking about a trip that Ron and her took to South Africa.
Our trip began in Cape Town, which has a very busy harbor and a Table Mountain in the background. The king protea is the national flower. Behind the bird of paradise flower is a monument to the French Huguenots who were fleeing religious persecution. The Dutch offered them free passage to South Africa if they brought seed and equipment to plant vineyards, which are still prospering. It is a land of contrasts in the housing, with the people, with the scenery, with the natural resources. Some good, some bad. The Cape of Good Hope Lighthouse was built too high up and was often in the clouds, so there were many boat wrecks till a new lighthouse was built closer to the water's edge. Cape Agulhas, just east of Cape Hope, is the southernmost point of Africa, with lots of rocks and lots of high waves and lots of boat wrecks again. This is on a windy day where the Indian and Atlantic Oceans meet. This is some good government housing in the country. These are called rondewels. They're housing, usually built in family groupings, and we saw rock formations that were the same shape. This is Shakaland in Swaziland. It's a Zulu village built for an 80s TV show. Now there is a hotel and a conference center for learning Zulu traditions and for other events. That was our porter, and this is inside our cabin. We had half of one of those nice looking cabins. Our square dancers invited our Zulu guide to join them, which was lots of fun. The guide explaining the model of the village, which we then were able to visit after getting permission from the chief. Now we're off to Kruger National Park. This is the Land Rover in which we went on safari every morning and evening for 3 days. We'll look at a few of the animals. These are the zebra. No two have identical markings. Got some guinea hens in the front there too. It was hard to find the animals. They blended in so well with the trees and the leaves. This is a cheetah family, enjoying the sunshine, and it was wonderful to be able to see all these animals in nature, right where they belong. They're the big giraffe. You could find them easily with their long necks. We stayed in a lodge in this Shishingani Lodge, and the pathways were all raised so that the smaller animals could travel underneath. We went out these walkways to our cabins that had little porches right out the back and the animals right across the fence beside us. It was wonderful. Here's an elephant at the gateway into the lodge. The gate was open. I was afraid it would come in, but it just went past. This is farmland. South Africa has many natural resources, farming being one of them. Then we went to Pretoria, and they are noted for their jacaranda trees, those beautiful purple-colored trees. The town was beautiful. This is in Soweto, and this is the church where the students sought safety when the police opened fire on their peaceful march in June of 1976. This is housing in Soweto, always with fences around them for security, regarding of your level of income. And another one of the slums that's in the country. This is just a taste of South Africa, which we enjoyed very much.
A big thanks to Shirley Marie. I think Africa is on a lot of people's bucket list. Next, we have a presentation by my very own Mary Phillips. Mary and I traveled to the Galapagos in February of last year as part of a vacation to Panama, Ecuador, and the cruise through the Galapagos Islands.
Hi. John and I were very fortunate to have been able to travel to Galapagos in February of 2020. We went with Rad and Deb Michelson from our church and another couple from Kincardine. We were on board a boat called the Yelida 2. It had 16 passengers and 8 crewmen. It was a wonderful way to travel. We got to know the other passengers really well. We would go out on the pangas to either snorkel or hike. We got to do each at least once, and lots of times twice per day. It was fabulous. While snorkeling, we saw turtles, sea lions, iguanas, and many different types of fish. This is my favorite video though, it's got the iguana eating, a turtle coming over, and then the sea lions that came to swim and show off. Of course, the Galapagos is most famous because of Charles Darwin, who visited in 1835. And of course, that led to his theory of evolution. The Galapagos is actually a group of volcanic islands located in the Pacific Ocean just off of Ecuador. On land, we visited a few different tortoise reserves. The tortoises can live to be 150 years old. Then, of course, there are iguanas. The Galapagos iguana eats algae from the sea. They expend most of their energy holding their breath and diving under the water. The rest of the time, they have to rest and soak up the heat from the sun. There are other land creatures, like the Sally Lightfoot crab. But of course, the penguins are what everybody went for, and of course they didn't disappoint us, they were adorable. We saw stingrays. These are golden stingrays. A fun fact, a group of stingrays is called a fever. This is the Galapagos hawk. These ones were mating. After mating, the male starts collecting sticks for a nest. Cormorants swam under us while we were snorkeling. There were flamingos. Did you know a group of flamingos is called a flamboyance? There were many, many types of birds. I think my favorite is the pelican. They just seem to have so much personality. We went in February and there were lots of baby birds to see. We saw the ever-famous blue-footed boobies and red-footed boobies. And who'd you think ever named these birds? But my favorite of all were the frigates and the males with their bright red pouch. This is the Galapagos short-eared owl. Both in the water and on the land, the sea lions are adorable. A group of sea lions is called a herd. We saw sharks. A group of sharks is called a shiver. A pod of dolphins swam beside our boat. The landscape and fauna are breathtaking and very diverse. We spent the last few days on the island of Santa Cruz, relaxing and exploring. We visited the Darwin Center, and we swam in a swimming hole called Las Grietas. We really enjoyed the Galapagos, and I hope someday you get to explore it too.
Thanks, Mary. I would highly recommend the Galapagos. Were you paying attention? Did you notice anybody from our congregation in some of those pictures? There was actually another couple from town too, but I don't have permission to advertise them yet. Anyways, the next presentation is by Rad Michelson. Deb and Rad traveled to Split, Croatia. Take it away.
This presentation is on our recent trip to Split, Croatia. This map shows Croatia in the circle. It's across the Adriatic Sea from Italy. Split is the second largest city in Croatia, and it is on the coast. This area was part of the Roman Empire and the birthplace of Diocletian, the emperor of Rome in late 3rd century AD. His reign was known for its robust persecution of Christians. He retired to a palace that he had built on the site of present-day Split. It was less a palace than a small walled city, square in shape and covering almost 10 acres. It takes up half of Split's old town, as can be seen on this map. This replica of the palace shows that it contained not only private living quarters, but temples, streets, public buildings, baths, courtyards, galleries, a garrison, a domed vestibule, and his octagonal mausoleum. The bell tower seen in this aerial view of the palace was built in the early 12th century in front of his former mausoleum, and today serves as the dominant landmark in the city. The mausoleum and bell tower complex is known today as St. Domnius's Cathedral. The altar and crucifix highlight the interior of the cathedral, with the original Roman columns and the ornate capitals. Outside the entrance to the bell tower, which is on the left, is the courtyard or peristyle of the palace, with its colonnade. Through the door at the end of the formal entrance is the formal entrance to the palace's imperial apartments. The vestibule is the first section of the imperial corridor into the Diocletian's living quarters, originally topped with a dome. The acoustics in the vestibule are exceptional, and local singing groups gather regularly to entertain there. Just outside the peristyle is a view of the Silver Gate, with an original walkway of Roman-laid paving stones. The view from the top of the bell tower are magnificent, as advertised, particularly those of the harbor. The octagonal tower in the center of this view is the Venetian Tower, all that remains of a medieval castle built along the shoreline during the 15th century. The old medieval town hall was erected in the mid-15th century and is now a museum. It is located in the People's Square near the palace's Iron Gate, and in that same square as our apartment. A third-floor walk-up with stone walls, a beamed ceiling, and a kitchenette. Pretty convenient. I like to take pictures without a lot of tourists in them, so I was often up early to get photos without the usual crowds. And one time, I included the municipal employees cleaning the streets. The city was very clean, and with typical streets in the old town no wider than this, it would be very obvious if they were not kept clean. The Golden Gate was not far from our apartment, and we often met fellow travelers there, at the statue outside the gate. We affectionately called him Merlin. The statue was sculpted by Ivan Mishtrovic, born in Croatia in the 1880s, and ranked as one of the most prominent Croatian artists of the early 20th century, whose work had gained worldwide recognition. He has a gallery on the outskirts of Split dedicated to his work. We spent a most enjoyable afternoon there. We also enjoyed the views of the Adriatic beaches along the road to the gallery. Mistrovic's statue of Marko Marulic graces the square near the Venetian Tower. Marulic is regarded as the father of the Croatian Renaissance. The palace and old town were full of great street scenes, like this 1,000-plus-year-old house, alleged to have been built around 900 AD. Or the fashion apparel in this store window. The designs were painted on the dresses. The Roman mosaic floor designs were to be found in recently excavated sections of the palace. This seahorse graces the wall outside a seafood restaurant. The Croatian National Theater building in an area around the palace. This unusual street fountain caught a lot of attention. The housing within the palace grounds that had sprung up over the centuries. The adaptive reuse within the palace was fascinating as well as admirable. Urban renewal within a centuries-old setting. Almost hidden in the palace's south wall is the Bronze Gate, where cargo for the palace from ships unloaded at nearby docks passed through this gate and into the palace cellars, a vast storage complex under the living quarters. The original vaulted ceilings helped it to be chosen as a setting for the Game of Thrones video series. Outside the Bronze Gate is the Riva, that is famous for its profusion of cafes, bars, pubs, food and entertainment venues. Many evenings we joined trip guides Carol Johnson and Jim Coffin for a stroll and a local treat on the Riva before lights out.
Thanks, Rad. I must admit that I never heard of Split. I'm glad you gave me a good geography lesson, and I will be able to talk about it in the future. Next, Elaine Holmes has made a trip to South.
We begin in Lyon. These 3D murals cover the facades on several of the buildings in the city center. Lyon is known as a cultural city. It was designated a UNESCO site in 1998. It is the home of Interpol and the Center for Cancer Research for France. This is a 2,000-year-old Roman theater, and it is still used for concerts today. Traboules are unique to the Lyonese culture. These steps lead to a central court surrounded by balconies of apartments. They also serve as a shortcut to the next street. The Basilica of Notre-Dame de Fouviers is situated atop the Fouviers Hill, which overlooks the city of Lyon. The gold Christ dominates one of the towers. The nave and high altar. Please note the ornamentation and the opulence. It's striking, as well as the ceiling ornamentation. The next city we visit is Avignon, situated on the Rhone River. These intact rampart walls surround the historic city and date back to the 14th century. The modern city is noticeably in contrast. The Palace of Popes also dates from the 14th century. Pope Clement V moved his court here to avoid the chaos in Rome. 7 subsequent popes held court here for 100 years. This Pont d'Avignon is a 13th century bridge that was never completed across the Rhone. It extends only halfway. This is a view of the Rhone River from the bridge. Okay. This is Nimes. It's also known as the French Rome. This Roman temple consists of a portico and a shrine room, and this is the restored area of the fresco design. The next center is Arles, and this is a 14th century church. The arena, which was built in the 1st century during the reign of Augustus, has tiered seating and is all stone. Bullfights and festivals still are held here. These are the exterior walls. Vincent van Gogh resided and painted in the town of Arles during 1888 and 89. The Jardin, the garden, he painted at this site. Also Starry Nights. The garden now bears the same plant species as it did then. These are scenes along the French Riviera. In Saint-Tropez, the boats are small to large, luxury cruisers and four-masters. In Cannes, famous for the International Film Festival, is a playground for the rich and famous. There are beaches and luxury hotels. These are some scenic views along the coast. The construction of highways on these mountainsides must be a real challenge. Jasmine grows wild along the street, and its aroma just filled the whole area. This is Ease, the little narrow cobblestone streets and stairs gave us our exercise for the day. Obviously, no cars are permitted. Buildings seemingly cling to the mountainsides. This is a view of Monaco Harbor and its luxury boats, situated on the Ligurian Sea. There's narrow streets again here, although scooters and motorbikes were able to negotiate. Pedestrians beware. This is a lovely wide sandy beach in front of our hotel at Nice. I will leave you overlooking the beautiful blue Mediterranean Sea, and possibly you can be thinking about exploring southern France yourself in the future.
Thanks, Elaine. That looked like a fabulous trip. Next, Terry Boyd compiled and recorded a YouTube video of Gardens of Ireland that Joseph and he took on one of their many trips. Take it away. Thanks, Terry. The gardens were beautiful. Terry actually made up a second 5-minute YouTube video. If anyone's interested in seeing the second video, you can either contact myself or Terry, and we will forward you the link. Or maybe, you never know, maybe there'll be a second Around the World in 60 Minutes. We shall see. Next is Nancy Hamilton, speaking about a trip that Jim and her took to Newfoundland and Labrador.
Our presentation tonight is about our 15-day trip to Newfoundland and Labrador in June of 2018. Although not far from home, this was definitely one of our favorite trips ever. The coach tour allowed us to experience every aspect of this province: the history, the sights, the folklore, the music, the food, and most importantly, the people. We flew into Deer Lake and stayed overnight at the charming historic Glenmill Inn in Corner Brook. After meeting our guide and fellow travelers, we knew we were in for a really good time. Our first excursion took us on a city tour of Corner Brook with scenic views of the city and Bay of Islands from Crow Hill. We then followed the Viking Trail to Norris Point and saw our first views of Grossmorn Park, a World Heritage Site. We stopped for a hike at the Arches Provincial Park with its impressive limestone formations carved out by tidal waves. We traveled to the National Historic Park at Port au Choix. We stopped at a family-owned factory and learned about the harvesting and tanning of sealskin. We passed many charming coves and arrived at Lange aux Meadows, a National Historic Site which was settled by the Vikings around the year 1000. We toured the sod-covered buildings and learned how these people. At St. Lunaire-Quiquet, we were delighted to see the first of 3 large icebergs. The aquamarine color and size were awesome. Next, we went on to St. Anthony's and hiked the Iceberg Alley Trail, where we saw our second iceberg. Next, we took a ferry across the Strait of Belle Isle to Labrador. We toured along the strait and saw our third iceberg, and stopped at L'Anse l'Amour to explore the 125-foot lighthouse, the tallest in Atlantic Canada. We went as far as Red Bay, where we visited the interpretive center and harbor. The mountainous scenery was beautiful. The next day we headed back to Newfoundland and stayed overnight in the village of Cow Head, where we had the opportunity to enjoy a local lobster dinner and also attend a theater production of Newfoundland music and comedy. Here we are on a scenic boat tour on Bonnie Bay in Grossmorn Park. While aboard, we were entertained by a local band, Anchors Away, and we were inducted as honorary Newfies, or as they say, we were screeched. It involved reciting a verse, dancing a jig, taking a shot of rum, and kissing a cod. After the cruise, we hiked on the Tableland Mountains with their desolate beauty and serpentine rock. That night we had a traditional Newfoundland meal called a jig supper, and we also enjoyed iceberg beer made from 20,000-year-old water from the icebergs. On July 1st, we headed east on the Trans-Canada Highway. Along the way, we stopped at Kings Point Historical Museum, where we saw a massive 50-foot skeleton of a humpback whale. We continued east through the picturesque coves and villages with a stop at Boyd's Cove, where we saw cultural exhibits of the Beothuk Aboriginal people. Then to Little Harbour. We arrived at Gander and had a great tour of the Gander Airport and heard local stories about its history and the significant role of the airport and the Newfoundland people in supporting the 6,700 strangers from nearly 100 countries after the terrorist attack on 9/11. The next day we did a walking tour of the historic village of Trinity and stopped along the Atlantic coast at Dugin Provincial Park to enjoy the gorgeous cliffs and rock formations. We also stopped at Bonavista, where we enjoyed lunch at the marina. And Jim enjoyed a piece of iceberg lemon meringue pie. We enjoyed a stop at Bay Bulls and took a boat tour to the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve, where we saw thousands of puffins, adorable seabirds that breed in that area. We then headed to Cape Spear, the easternmost point in Canada, before heading to our final destination of St. John's. We had booked an extra 3 days in St. John's, so we really had a chance to explore the city and the surrounding area. We especially enjoyed Signal Hill with its Cabot Tower and wonderful views of the Atlantic Ocean and St. John's. We met a humongous Newfoundland dog, visited the picturesque Quidi Vidi harbor, and marveled at the painted row houses. Our last day we drove to Fairyland Lighthouse, known for its picnic lunches on the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic. We had not yet seen a whale on our trip, and all of a sudden they arrived searching for the krill, the tiny fish they love to eat. It was like a miracle, dozens of them jumping and playing in the water before us. We sat for 2 hours watching the display, the perfect ending for this wonderful vacation.
It was nice to have a taste of Canada amongst the other worldly locations. Wow, I'm hungry for lemon pie. Not sure if it'll be iceberg style though or not. Screech also sounds like something I would like. Thanks, Nancy. Our final presentation is by our very own Gord Dunbar. He is speaking about 3 megachurches he visited in the United States.
Hi. 7 years ago, I had the privilege of taking a sabbatical. Now, part of what I did was to visit 3 megachurches in the United States to research their well-developed small group ministries. First church was Saddleback Community Church in Los Angeles. Their weekly attendance in person was 26,000 people. This is their worship space on the largest of their 8 locations. Looking backward, showing the volunteers organizing the worship. Notice the camera on the long boom. It is just one of 2 working with 3 tripod cameras and 2 roving cameras. They broadcast to an audience of over 10,000. You notice the high-tech look of the stage. The theater was packed once worship began. As a result, this overflow area provided extra seating outside. And here's one of their coffee bars for sleepy attendees to enjoy. Surrounding the building are 17 coffee stands like these dotted around the site. This is the theater just for teens to worship. And this is the worship space for the Sunday school groups. This is one of their 7 full immersion baptismal fonts. You were not considered a member without being baptized by them, even if you have already been baptized. Now, I was furious because it is just bad theology. They don't baptize, God does. This is one of those 3 gathering spaces outside for after baptism parties. It features an outdoor kitchen with 3 barbecues. In another large building, there are meeting spaces connected to a food court and hangout spaces available. In still another facility, 20 minutes away, this is the luxury retreat and training center for small groups and for small group leaders. Now you can understand why I say luxury. And here is where their fleet of paddle boats is housed. Finally, this is the purpose tree on the property. Founding pastor and current CEO Rick Warren's named his book for this, The Purpose-Driven Life. Now, that's what I call branding. The next mega church is North Point Community Church in Atlanta, Georgia. They have 6 locations and welcome over 33,000 in-person worshipers each week. I counted close to 150 volunteers who directed traffic into their parking lot and everyone into their building. I actually felt more welcome to this church than any other due to the personal touch. This is the inside of one of 2 identical worship spaces in the building. It seats about 4,000 people. And there are 300 seats set aside at the front for newcomers to the church as a sign of generous welcome. Once worship starts, you will notice that there are lots of gray heads, just like our congregation. After all, young families are getting their children to Sunday school. It is called Waumba for the cool jungle factor. Youth in grades 7 to 12 meet at Up Street, featuring all the electronic bells and whistles. Their model for church is all about small groups. This is Waumba Sunday School, which meets in groups around the circles on the floor. Every week, there is a baptism in a tank in the front of the main adult worship space. They are required to record a video here explaining why they want to be baptized. The youngest allowed for baptism is grade 7. While I learned the most about small groups in Atlanta, I discovered the reason why Willow Creek Community Church in the western suburbs of Chicago was so successful. This is their parking lot when I arrived for a tour. It accommodates over 5,000 vehicles and looks just like, well, a shopping mall. I don't believe that's an accident. This is not the main worship space. It is for the youth and features a full television broadcast studio behind the scenes. Here is a high-end coffee shop that can seat 75 people, while their food court features 7 restaurants for your eating pleasure. You can also shop in the 10,000 title bookstore upstairs. I was there on Mother's Day, as the decorations indicate. Notice the information kiosk to help people. If you're short of cash, use one of their on-site ATMs. Here is that same space once people have arrived. Notice the escalator, just like a suburban shopping mall. Now, this is the worship space for families and adults. It seats 7,300 people and is the largest theater in the United States. It features 30 sections, each seating 100 to 300 people, and they hire a pastor to shepherd each section. Here they are resetting the stage after the earlier worship time. I wanted to sleep in that time. And once worship was started, a tribute to Mom was featured. And you can see that the theater is full and younger than the other 2 megachurches. Once worship is over, you can enjoy the mall-like fountains or have lunch in the food court with your family. I realize that having a church building which looks and feels like a suburban mall makes the space feel comfortable, familiar, and in tune with the wider society in which they live. It feels like home then, and is therefore easier for tentative newcomers to attend. A suburban shopping mall calling itself a church.
Did you notice the picture of the church on the screen a couple of times? It looks a little small compared to these 3 mega churches. I foresee a road trip also for the AV team. Judy, can you organize it and arrange for the budget approvals? We hope that you enjoyed the presentations. We stayed inside our time allotted. Gord, a big thank you to the 8 presenters. This webinar would not have been possible without their input. We would have loved to have done this in person at the church, so we could have experienced a little bit of a social side to this presentation, but hopefully tonight provided some of the joy during these interesting times. We did limit each presentation to 5 to 6 minutes. I'm sure that each presenter has additional experiences they would love to talk about once we can get together in person. Like we said at the beginning of the presentation, we are nearing our fundraising goal for our new heating system. A big thank you again. However, there are other projects to work on. If you would like to donate to the Capital Fund, there are various ways to do it. This slide shows that you will see when you go to our church webpage. We'll always accept cash and checks, but with COVID, these are very limited. If doing e-transfers, you will use the email on the screen, kucesteward@vmts.com. No password will be required. The Interact e-transfer icon on our website is very interactive, and the instructions for those that may need a little bit of help in doing e-transfers. PayPal and Canada Helps are also available on our webpage and allow you to use credit cards if that is your preference. All donations go through yours truly, the donation steward. I will now turn this over to Gord for final remarks and a closing prayer.
First, I would like to say a big thank you to Mary and John Phillips for this evening. With 56 attendees, it indicates how much we have all needed time away, even if through a digital travelogue like tonight. Without their patience and preparation to produce and host this evening, none of us would have been able to gather together and see these wonderful exotic sights. I must say that John's constant array of hats really topped off the international flavor of this evening's presentations. Thank you to all of you who have given to the Capital Project. As well, thank you to those who prepared the grant application to the United Church of Canada. We have since found out that up to $26,000 will be contributed by the United Church as a grant toward the project. Together, the work applying for the grant and your many generous donations will truly make a difference in maintaining our church facility, all so it is ready when the building eventually reopens. I'd like to use an old Celtic blessing taken from the book Prayers for Everyday Life, compiled by Ray Simpson and published in 1999. Though we may not safely travel as yet, consider this prayer at our leave taking as an anticipated future promise. Let's pray. God bless the path on which you go. God bless the earth beneath your feet. God bless your destination. God be a smooth way before you, a guiding star above you, a keen eye behind you, this day, this night, and forever. God be with you whenever you pass, Jesus to be with you whenever you climb, the Spirit to be with you wherever you stay. God be with you at each stop and each sea, at each lying down and each rising up, in the trough of the waves, on the crest of the billows, each step of the journey you take. Amen. I'll turn it back to you, John.
Thank you, Gord. Well, that concludes our presentation for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. Mary and I had a lot of fun learning a bit of Zoom, learning a bit of video editing, and we really enjoyed it.